The Bible. It's a collection of ancient texts, prophecies, poetry, history, and letters. It holds stories of kings, shepherds, wars, and miracles. But for many, the Bible remains an unopened mystery. Here at The Bible Explained, we're not just reading verses, we're exploring the cultural bedrock and the dramatic narrative woven through its 66 books. Hit that subscribe button and let the journey begin.
All right, let's dive into one of history's great detective stories. We are on the hunt for a lost city, a place so infamous its name is still used today to describe sin and total destruction, the city of Sodom. But what if it was more than just a story? What if it was a real, historical place?
I mean, that image from the book of Genesis is just incredibly powerful, isn't it? A city completely wiped off the map by a storm of fire and brimstone falling from the sky. It's a story that has absolutely captivated people for thousands of years.
And that right there is the million-dollar question. Was Sodom a real city, or is it just a myth? This is a huge debate that has archaeologists, scientists, and biblical scholars digging for answers, trying to solve this ancient mystery once and for all.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the question itself. Then we'll get into the two main suspects for where Sodom might be, the north versus the south theory. After that, we're going to dig into the evidence, both archaeological and textual. Then, get ready for a major plot twist from outer space. And finally, we'll see why this whole case is really far from being closed.
You see, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah isn't just some dusty old tale. It's the catalyst, the spark that ignited a real-world, centuries-long quest to find a city that was literally judged out of existence.
For the longest time, most people just assumed the story was an allegory, a moral lesson. But then, in the 20th century, as archaeology got more and more advanced, a new thought started to take hold. What if this story is actually based on a real historical event? And that's when the search got serious.
Okay, so the modern search for Sodom has basically split into two main camps. We have two rival locations, both near the Dead Sea, and this is really the core of the whole debate.
So, let's meet our two main contenders. In one corner, you have the Northern Theory. This theory points to a site called Tal el-Hammam, and its biggest champion is Dr. Stephen Collins. The idea here is that Sodom was a huge, powerful city-state. Then, in the other corner, you have the Southern Theory. This one focuses on a site called Bob Edge Draw, and it's backed by scholars like Dr. Bryant Wood. This location fits more of the traditional ideas of where Sodom might be.
Let's just pull up a map here to get our bearings. The Dead Sea is right in the middle of everything. The northern site, Tal el-Hammam, is up in the Jordan Valley, northeast of the sea. The southern site, Bab ed-Draw, is down on a plain to the southeast. And these two places aren't close. We're talking more than 50 miles apart. So these are two totally different theories.
So which one is it, north or south? To figure that out, we've got to look at the evidence. We're going to compare what the Bible says with what archaeologists have actually pulled out of the ground with their trowels.
Now this is where the textual detective work really gets intense. The southern theory has a lot of scriptural ammo. Genesis 10 puts Sodom on the southern border of Canaan. Ezekiel 16 flat out says Sodom was south of Jerusalem. And Genesis 14 describes an invading army coming from the south, which makes perfect sense for a southern city. The northern theory really hinges on one verse, Genesis 13, where Lot journeyed east. But critics say, hey, that could have just been the start of his trip before he headed south.
And it's not just the texts. Supporters of the southern site say they have physical proof. Researchers have found what they claim are little balls of pure sulfur, literally brimstone, encased in ash scattered all over the area. I mean, that sounds an awful lot like the fire and brimstone from the Bible, right?
Okay, so things are looking pretty good for the southern theory. But just when you think you've got it figured out, the northern site, Tal el-Hammam, comes back with a massive, dramatic plot twist. And this one doesn't come from an ancient book. It comes from science.
This whole scientific theory centers on something called a cosmic airburst. Okay, so picture this. A meteor or a comet comes screaming into the atmosphere. But instead of hitting the ground, it explodes in the air. The energy release is just unbelievable. A similar thing happened in Tunguska, Siberia back in 1908, and it flattened more than 800 square miles of forest.
Now, here is the most jaw-dropping piece of evidence from Tal el-Hammam. They've found signs of temperatures that exceeded 2,000 degrees Celsius.
Just to give you some context, that is hotter than lava from a volcano. There's just no way any ancient technology could produce heat like that.
And the evidence is just wow. Archaeologists there found pottery that literally melted into glass, mud bricks that bubbled up from the heat. They found these tiny little spheres of melted iron. But the real smoking gun? Something called shocked quartz. It's a type of mineral that only forms under the kind of extreme pressure you'd get from a cosmic impact. All of this points to one single catastrophic explosion around the year 1650 BCE.
And the effects of an event like this would have lingered for a long, long time. An explosion not big could have blasted a huge amount of salt from the Dead Sea all over the surrounding farmland, making it totally impossible to grow anything. And this could be the answer to another big mystery called the Late Bronze Age Gap, a strange 600-year period where this whole region, which used to be really prosperous, was suddenly just empty, abandoned.
So, a cosmic airburst that perfectly matches the description of fire from the sky seems like a slam dunk for the northern theory, doesn't it? Well, not so fast. The case is definitely not closed, because the southern camp has some really strong counterarguments we have to look at. Critics of the northern airburst theory point out three major problems. First, the timeline. That date, 1650 BCE, just doesn't line up with the biblical timeline for when Abraham and Lot were supposed to be alive. Second, you still have the geography problem. The Bible just keeps pointing south. And finally, there's a theological issue. The New Testament says Sodom was left as a visible example for all time. A city like Tal al-Hammam, which was buried under dirt for thousands of years, can't really be a visible warning, can it?
You know, all this talk about where Sodom was gets you thinking about the other big question. Why was it destroyed? When you look at theological analysis, the idea is that the city's real sin wasn't just one thing. It was this deep-seated pride that led to all sorts of other problems, like cruelty and corruption.
And the Bible itself seems to back this up. It paints a pretty complex picture. The book of Ezekiel, for example, really focuses on the city's pride and the fact that they ignored the poor and needy. Then the book of Jude in the New Testament talks about sexual immorality and unnatural desire. So it seems like the specific actions were really just symptoms of a much deeper moral problem. So what is this search for Sodom really all about? Is it a hunt for hard historical proof of a Bible story? Is it a scientific investigation into an ancient cataclysm? Or is it really about grappling with a timeless moral lesson? You know, maybe it's all three. The one thing we know for sure is that the search continues, and the final verdict on the lost city of Sodom is still out.
The Bible isn't just a history book. It's a living, challenging text. As you reflect on what we covered today regarding this topic, consider how this new context changes your reading of the verses. If you appreciated this breakdown, sharing it with just one friend who struggles with understanding the Bible is the best way you can support the channel. Subscribe for more, click here for your next explanation, and never stop seeking clarity. Until next time.